title of my presentation is Preparing for Litigation, but could be arbitration or anything. So what I will discuss is my view as an in-house counsel on how we do things in terms of litigation. How do we prepare? How do we analyze the risk? It's a pretty basic presentation, but it's more relevant, as we discussed with my panelists, is the questions that will come after the presentation and any discussion that we might have. So before I get into the presentation, for me, the best way to win a litigation or a dispute is to avoid it. So that would be the best advice I could give after some years of experience. But if you're forced into litigation, then the second best advice is to fight like a tiger. So that would be the approach for any litigation. So in terms of the agenda, I'm going to discuss first the early case assessment. So this is what we do when we have a case. We do an early case assessment. Then we do risk rating, and we take a decision on what we do next. And then I'm going to give a couple of examples of cases. So the early case assessment. So what we do, basically we do the facts review of the case. We undertake a thorough analysis of the facts, we go through them, and from an in-house perspective, it depends on the case and the nature of the case. So at HPE, if we're into a solution project or an IT project, then I have to make sure that I have the relevant engineers and delivery managers and BU managers in a meeting discussing the various issues with the project and why it went wrong or why there is a potential case against us. So if it was an employment issue, I have to make sure that my HR manager is present and the manager of the employee who is suing us or we are suing is there. So one of the main issues to prepare a case is to go through the facts review with the relevant stakeholders, and based on these meetings and the initial case assessment, we'll be able to make a decision. Then after the facts review, which is a collective exercise done internally, then comes my role, of course. I have to give an initial opinion. So what I do or what my team does is we go through, obviously, the law and depending on court's precedents as well, and we take initial claim on what we think our chances are, depending on the facts of the case. Now, our regional counsel, John Schultz, says that one of the main issues as an in-house counsel, the main traits that an in-house counsel must have is a good judgment. And I think this could be applied to life. So if you make a good, I'm seeing you, do you agree or do you not agree? I think a good judgment is a very important trait in a person because as an in-house counsel or as a lawyer, you have to make, you have hundreds of emails per day, you have to make 10, 15, 20 judgment calls. And if you have a good judgment, you want to make sure that you get all these emails or advices right, and that would define who you are as an in-house counsel. So we do the facts review, we do the court law and court precedent review, and we give an initial advice. Now, obviously, in the second phase, the courts and law precedent review, and depending on the case, we have to engage outside counsel, which for me is a very important part of the process. Now, Mu'taz was saying a couple of days ago, and I discussed with him, that when we send something, when we ask a law firm for an advice, we don't expect a 50-50 answer, because a 50-50 answer would not cut it for us. Obviously, the lawyers would want to tell you 50-50 because they want to protect themselves, and I used to be in private practice. But when we seek outside counsel advice, we want to know what are the chances of our claim, because that will have significant impacts internally. So that was the early case assessment. We then do the financial exposure rating, and as a multinational company which is listed, we have quarterly based targets, and then we need to make sure that we set the right financial exposure, whether it's low or high, depending on the case. Low being, of course, our realistic best case if we're going to win, and high if it is the worst case. And as Vincent has mentioned, it could be the worst case. So, and then what we have to do is accruals. So we need to make sure that if the risk is X amount of dollars, we need to inform our finance department to make sure the right accruals are there. So if we lose the case, we have the money to pay it. And it doesn't mean we don't simply follow the other party's claim. So if they're claiming for $100 million, we don't accrue obviously for $100 million, but we also look at our position in the facts, and we may accrue financial exposure as high as $10 million and as low as $1 million. And it's very difficult, at least that's what I learned through practice, to change this estimate. So if you say it's $10 million, it is $10 million, it has to go through every quarter or projected for 2 or 3 years. If you want to change that, you must have an external outside opinion, you must have the in-house counsel approval, so it's a lengthy process. So that will be the early case assessment that we do, which is pretty basic. After that, we have the risk rating and the decision making. So we classify the risk into 3 areas. It will be remote, reasonably possible, or probable. It could be high, low, medium. It could be green, red, yellow, whatever you want to call it, but this is what we do. Once the case gets probable, greater than 75%, then we consider that the financial risk is high. Then we keep on reviewing the ECA, and if we feel the risk has changed, then we change our risk ratio accordingly. We also can factor things like cost of the litigation, potential damage to relationship, and settlement options. All of these things get factored into the financial risk. Now we've done the early case assessment. We've seen what our financial risk may be. Then we need to take a decision. We sue, we defend, we settle, or otherwise mediation or anything else. And this is the very important part where we say we try to avoid dispute as much as we can. After doing this, we go through governments to settle claims and therefore need to be able to justify our decision making and why we approve a dollar amount to offer to settle. So if we decide to settle, then we do this on solid grounds. So we know we have external counsel advice, we have our internal advice, we have the financial accruals, and then we'll be able to take a decision. And realistically speaking, the legal risk is properly analyzed, and then we only ever settle within a range as the corporation believes accurately reflects our exposure. And if it has to go through courts and litigation then or arbitration, we make sure it does. So that's basically generally how do we assess cases. What I've done is I'm a practical guy, so just give three examples of cases that I've seen throughout my career. So give you first example. So government contract. So government contract for supply of services. We're supplying services, let's say IT services, and the total contract value is $40 million. We don't deliver, we poorly deliver, or we fail on delivery. Now the contract has one side, the terms and conditions with the government, of course, that's the rule. There's a parent company guarantee, there's a bank guarantee of $5 million, there's no cap on liability, and there's local law and local courts. So for us, it's a suicide mission. So what we do in our early case assessment, we look at the whole case, and if looking at these facts, of course, these are only conclusion of the facts, but the case is more complex. Then probably we believe that we're going to lose this case if we go to court, especially that we have poorly delivered and the terms are one-sided. So we put the risk exposure as high, of course, and the decision would most likely be the client wants to sue, but is offering settlement if we weigh 50% of our invoices, which is a lot. But then we have to put in balance what are we going to lose if we go to court, in the local court against the government, and how long will it take, and whether we settle and bite the bullet, as they say. So that's basically one example. Give another example. So these are just random examples. Marketing and advertising services provided by a local supplier. TCV is $1 million, it's not a very big case. Contract is as per our standard terms, local law and local codes. Supplier did not provide proof of execution after invoices were paid. So we paid their invoices, but they didn't provide anything that they've actually done the work. We want to sue for unsubstantiated invoices. So what do? We go through also the facts, we get external counsel advice, and in this case, we decide to sue. Final example. Employment dispute. And that was actually one of the first cases I I handled. So employee has resigned and his resignation has been accepted. Then he changes his mind and he said that you've fired me or I was arbitrarily dismissed. And he claims for $2 million in compensation before the local employment court, which for arbitrary dismissal. So we offer $25K as settlement, and he refuses. So what do? We go through the case, and the court at the end gives him $2,000, and that's an actual case. So our early case assessment here was simple. We met with HR, we saw the case, we saw the facts, and we saw that it was just an attempt by the employee to blackmail us or to drag us to court. And this is why we give a high settlement, more than he deserves, but then it is some of the day-to-day scenarios that we feel. As I said, we try to avoid dispute, but if we go through it, then we have to fight. And that's it from my side. Thank you very much.